They have celebrated October 7. Then they celebrated ballistic missile attacks on civilians in Israel. The problem is not with the Muslims. The problem is with Islam itself, with jihad itself.
Check out this powerful clip from Piers Morgan's interview with Musab Hassan Yousef, the son of Hamas. We'll watch it together, and then we'll unpack and talk about what's really being said here. And before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe in the corner so we can keep these conversations going.
Just first of all, your reaction to this appalling terror attack in Sydney.
Well, this is horrible. This is the outcome of 2 years of hateful indoctrination, demonizing the Jews, dehumanizing and delegitimizing Israel. What we were expecting. This has been a jihad campaign against the Jewish minority, and most people are in denial. It started on October 7, and actually it started way before October 7. But instead of understanding Israel's position, that Israel had no choice but to fight and eliminate Hamas, the world accused Israel of committing genocide. Then so many false narratives were built on that theory that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. And that led to the hatred against the Jewish people. It led to the Sydney attack, to Manchester attack, and it will lead to more attacks. Many times I said falsehood will eventually lead to violence, false narrative of occupation, of genocide, of ethnic cleansing. Things actually don't exist in reality. There is a tragedy in Gaza. Nobody's celebrating this tragedy in Israel. No Israeli politician or citizen wanted to go into Gaza. It's not a fun trip. It's not a walk in the park. Israel, after the atrocity of October 7, had to send its best men to die in Hamas booby traps, where they cannot even differentiate combatant from civilian, where the terrorists, jihadists, used their own people as human shields. So the outcome has been catastrophic. We understand this. But the world, instead of understanding Israel's position, what they did, they have been accusing Israel. They have demonized the Jewish people. And now they want to go after, in a Jewish hunt, after the Jewish people worldwide. And nobody's stopping them. They're going unchecked. What did they mean when they said globalize the Intifada from the beginning? They triumphed on October 8th. They celebrated the atrocities against civilians. And since then, they have been saying globalize the Intifada. What did they mean by globalizing Intifada? It means taking it to Sydney, take it to New York, take it to LA. Just the other day, the FBI exposed a plot targeting Los Angeles for plans to attack simultaneously at New Year's Eve. And they are affiliated with the pro-Palestine. They are not jihadists, they are not Muslims, they are leftists. But their ideology now is free Palestine and free Hawaii. This is what the FBI found with those guys. So the hateful indoctrination does not go in void, Piers. This is what we need to understand.
So here's the question I have for you, because you know a lot about this issue. You know both sides of the issue. You've lived on both sides of the issue. Here you had in Sydney a situation where a father and son had clearly become radicalised. They'd been in Australia for a number of years, since the early 2000s in the case of the father, seemingly living normal lives in the communities. One slight red flag with the son a few years ago, which the authorities, perhaps wrongly as it's turned out, concluded was not serious enough to warrant further investigation about who he was associating with. And then they become full-blown ISIS, you know, banners in their car, and they go and attack any Jewish people they can target. But we also saw a Muslim go in and display extraordinary courage in stopping one of these assassins, and for his trouble getting shot up, and is now in hospital recovering, thankfully. And it raises, I guess, the complexity of this, which is there are 2 billion Muslims in the world, and there are 15 million Jews. So a massive disparity in the numbers there. But people keep telling me, you know, a lot of Muslims agree with these Islamists. A lot of Muslims share this feeling. To which my instinctive response is, well, if that is the case, if even you had 10% of the world's Muslims who felt that way, that's 200 million people. So there would be these atrocities happening all the time, and they're not. And in fact, I would go further and say that, you know, about 80 to 90% of all the victims of Islamist terrorism are fellow Muslims, right? So it's not as straightforward as some people with their own agendas like to portray this issue. What do you feel about the reality here? How many of the Muslim population do you think share a hatred of Jews, for example? How many would have sympathy with Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis or ISIS or whatever it may be? You know, what is the reality here? Because if it was hundreds of millions, I would just assume the whole planet would be in flames all the time, and it's not. And I feel very strongly for Muslim friends of mine that I know, that every time one of these things happen, everyone wants to tar the whole religion with the same brush of extremism, which we don't do with other religions when people do it in, you know, if they're extreme Christians or Hindus or whatever it may be. It's not the same rule applied. So what do you feel about that?
You know, first of all, speaking of a father and son, as you know, my father wanted me to follow his footsteps of becoming a Hamas terrorist, basically. And this is when I dropped that idea, and I went against the interest of the family. On the other hand, I was born a Muslim myself. I studied Islam, I studied classic Arabic, I memorized huge portions of the Quran. I prayed to Allah 5 times a day. I was a devout Muslim. I was born in the mosque, literally in the mosque. I went to a Sharia school. I studied the Islamic law. And, but at some point, when I realized that it was a dead end, that it was leading to more violence, and that nothing could satisfy the Islamic ambition, I had to drop that Islamic identity. By the way, speaking of this hero in Sydney, and I tell you from personal experience, that this man, in that moment, he dropped all his identity. You think when he threw himself in the fire, he was thinking to himself, I am a Muslim, or I am an Australian? He dropped his entire interest. He risked his life, his physical body, his future, and he jumped into the fire to stop the killer. At that moment, he was not a Muslim. He did not have any identity. He was pure potential, pure humanity. This is what we need to see. And after that, you know, people labeled him a Muslim. Why? Because they have guilt. And especially the same crowd that has been demonizing the Jews and calling to slaughter the Jews, those are the ones who found opportunity to identify with heroism. They want it to be heroism when it's convenient, when it suits their narrative. But they did not see the other side, the killer, the embodiment of evil who was shooting civilians. They should actually identify with the other side, with the dark side, because this is the actual manifestation of their hateful indoctrination over the last 2 years. They have celebrated October 7th. Then they celebrated ballistic missile attacks on civilians in Israel, where they ran like... it was insane to see that celebration against civilians and the indiscriminate attack against civilians. And many of them, by the way, back in the day also celebrated suicide bombing attacks. So now the thing is the problem is not with the Muslims. The problem is with Islam itself, with jihad itself. And jihad is a unique concept only to the religion of Islam. You cannot find it in Christianity.
No,
you cannot find it in
but what I would
Buddhism,
say to that...
not in Hinduism.
Okay, but
please just let me finish.
Okay.
It's important. Please let me finish. So the thing is, the Muslims, the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful people. They don't want violence. This is the human nature. The human nature is against violence. This is what makes us different than the animals. But the problem, when Muslims identify with Islam, they give cover to the jihadists. And in many cases, they identify with something they completely oppose. And this is the identity crisis within Islam. And this is why I say to many of those peaceful Muslims who identify with Islam, and they could be in the hundreds of millions, who don't even know the Quran, who don't know the Islamic law, who don't know that they are actually required for physical and financial and social jihad. If they don't understand it, if they haven't gone to a Sharia school like I did, they go identifying because they think this is their ethnicity, but it's not. It's a label slapped on them. And I think in a moment where they have to choose between the higher interests of humanity or some identity given to them by their parents, they have to choose the higher interests of humanity the same way this hero, Ahmed, in Sydney did. In the Quran, it's obvious. Jihad is a fundamental pillar in the Islamic belief system. And it's jihad where a Muslim is required to sacrifice himself or herself, if necessary, to establish a khilafah. A khilafah is a global state. It's not the Islamic State that we saw these ugly images coming out of Syria and out of Sydney. It's a global Islamic State where there is only one Islamic ruler. Islam does not believe in diversity or multiplicity. They don't believe in other religions. Actually, what it really means when Muslims say, La ilaha illallah, it means literally there is no divinity but Allah. This means cancellation of Judaism, of Buddhism, of Hinduism, of Christianity, of all other belief systems, and consider Islam as the only and final belief. Well, this is very, very dangerous, but this is the essence.
But that is rejected,
of Islam,
isn't it?
Muslims...
Again, I come back to this. So in the United States, there are about 5 million Muslims and about 5 million Jews. In the UK, about 5 million Muslims and 250,000 Jews. So very different breakdown. But the reality is, in both countries, that in the majority of cases, you would say there's been pretty good assimilation of both those groups of people into normal society in the United States and the UK. There have been some bad incidents, but there hasn't been, it's not like you've got thousands of people rampaging around all day, every day, committing terrible acts. In other words, it seems to me that the majority of Muslims in the US and the UK go about their lives integrated pretty well with the culture and society they live in and don't want to pursue acts of violence. And so I come back to the fact that if you take that across the world with 2 billion people, the number of extremists is very small. Otherwise, we'd be seeing a lot more of this stuff going on. So again, I don't know what the answer is here, but I do know that it's not a case that the majority of Muslims support this or want any part of it. And that's my problem with how these, when these incidents blow up, I go on social media and all I see is appalling Islamophobia. I also see a lot of anti-Semitism. I see a lot of hatred generally spewing around. But it just remains clear to me that the vast majority of Muslims do not want to be violent.
Exactly, and I don't blame you. I think your observation is accurate, and it is the truth. But the thing is, why identify with something that you completely oppose? Like, for example, Muslims who don't believe in jihad. It's very similar to meat eaters who identify as vegans. They are not vegans. And the Muslims who don't believe in jihad, basically, they are not Muslims. They are going against the Islamic law. They are going against all the Islamic...
Yeah, but that's the point.
The essence of Islam.
Mossab,
it's not up to them.
Yeah, but hang on. That's the crucial point right there. right there. So what your position is that if you follow the faith of Islam, then you automatically have to sign up to violence. Whereas from everything I've heard from my moderate Muslim friends, of which I have many, is that is not how they interpret Islam. They do not see Islam as a faith that necessitates you being violent. It's the extremists that every religion has, and because there are 2 billion Muslims, there's going to be exponentially more probably Muslim extremists in other religions, just simply on numbers, but that they do not see Islam itself as the problem. They see extremism and extremist interpretation of Islam as the problem. And they make a clear delineation, whereas it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your position is anybody that follows the faith of Islam, 2 billion people right now do that they must all follow a path of violence, or they are reneging on what it means to follow Islam.
There's a conversation our society keeps postponing, not because it's unimportant, but because it's uncomfortable. And yet, the most dangerous ideas are not always the ones spoken out loud. They're the ones we refuse to examine. That conversation concerns Islam, and more specifically, radical elements that operate within it. And before saying anything else, a line must be drawn clearly. No civilization, no religion, and no people should ever be judged by their extremists. Judaism has extremists. Christianity has extremists. Secular ideologies have produced some of the most destructive extremism in history. And Islam includes millions of peaceful, devout individuals who seek family, dignity, faith, and meaning, not violence. That truth matters, but it does not end the conversation. The real moral question is not whether Muslims are violent. They are not. That's completely not the question. The question is whether certain interpretations of Islam have produced a theology that sanctifies violence, glorifies martyrdom, and places ideologies above sanctity of life. And the honest answer is yes. Radical Islam is not merely the results of poverty or politics. Those explanations are incomplete. It is rooted in ideas, and ideas, when fused with absolute certainty and power, become extraordinarily dangerous. Judaism offers a fundamentally different model. God does not dwell in coercion. The Torah rejects that. Abraham argues with God. Moshe Rabbeinu challenges God. Questioning is not rebellion, it's devotion. Faith requires conscious humility and moral restraint. When certainty loses humility, violence follows. The tragedy of our time is that much of the West is so afraid of appearing intolerant, just afraid of that it has abandoned moral discernment altogether. Nothing. Lines blur that must remain clear. Criticizing Islam is not bigotry. It is a moral responsibility. Protecting innocent life is not intolerance. It is the very foundation of civilization. But now, we need to go one step further, deeper, because what Jews are facing today is not the same that we faced our grandparents in the 30s and 40s. Then that was explicit. Jews were hated because they were Jews. The enemy openly said, Jews are Untermenschen, subhuman. Jews are parasites. Jews do not deserve to live. It was crude, direct, and just unmistakable. Today, the language that people are using has changed. Jews are told, oh, we don't hate you. You're not hated at all. They are told that they are the oppressors, colonizers, illegitimate. The claim is no longer that Jews have no right to live, but that Jews have no right to a land, no right to sovereignty. Let that sink in. No right to defend themselves, Israel. They say, Israel doesn't even belong to us. This is not classic anti-Semitism. This is much more dangerous. It's the denial of Jewish moral legitimacy. And Chazal, our sages, tell us that this would happen before Mashiach comes. The world will lose moral clarity. Truth will be distorted, good would be called evil, and evil will be called good. The nations would turn against Israel, not because Israel is wrong, but because truth itself would become unbearable. What we are seeing in America and across the West, it's not random. It's not just politics. It's actually something much deeper. It's Hashem revealing the world as it is, a society that can no longer distinguish between aggressor and victim, between a murderer and self-defense, between life and death. Such a society cannot endure. This is not simply anti-Semitism we can explain away or manage. It's a message. For generations, Jews believed that if we were reasonable enough, moral enough, quiet enough, we'd be safe. It's now showing us that when the world loses moral clarity, Jews are always the first asked to justify their existence. Eretz Yisrael is the answer to that reality, not as an escape, but as a calling. Israel is the place where Jewish life is not dependent on the moral confusion of the nations, is where Jews stand on the side of truth because Hashem told us to come here at the end of days, and the land has produced its fruit. Yemos HaMashiach is not a time of comfort. It's a time for decision. It's a time when Jews are asked to see what is happening clearly and choose where they stand. Choosing Israel is not fear. It's faith. It's emunah. It is responding to Hashem's call to return, to take responsibility, and to help bring the geula, the redemption, closer. The distortion of truth cannot last. A world that denies Israel cannot endure. And Am Yisrael, the Jewish nation, is being awakened to come home and stand on the right side of history for eternity. This is a conversation we need to be having. Thank you for watching. If you want to get more content like this, hit the subscribe button. I'd love to stay in touch. And feel free to go through my playlists. There's a couple of them with Rabbi Tuvia Singer and many other interesting topics that we could explore on my channel. Thank you for watching. Shavua Tov. And also look out for the Parsha Shir, the Parsha Talk, which is the portion that we're going to be discussing this week, towards the end of the week. If you want to brush up, it's in Genesis 42, 43, 44. It's the story of Joseph. So check that out and keep in touch. Shalom from just outside Jerusalem.